Recording started. Very good. Welcome everybody this evening, and call out to the virtual listeners out there. This is February 20th, 2016. We're going to do a workshop on student assessment, particularly online student assessment. For our pre-class checklist, we'll go down the list to make sure your phone is off, that all the distractions of life have been removed other than this course right now, and you've gathered any materials you may need during the next 20 minutes or so. Checking further on that, let's see that the equipment is working okay. Could you, everybody, give me a check if you can hear me? Very good. Okay, coming through 10-4 and clearing that. Would you give me another check if you see the recording button lit up on the upper right-hand side there? That's good. Good. That means this time I did it right. And you should see I guess slide 2 showing up in the upper part as well. Is that there? Very good. Okay, so we are moving the slides along forward as well. Everything seems to be ready to go. So let's get into it. But first, again as last time, let's be calm and create and see what we can make out of our combined intelligence tonight. What we're going to do today is look a little bit at how targeting assessments can and further the learning objectives of the course. We'll explore some of the inherent advantages and potential problems, disadvantages of online assessments. And we'll do a case study on assessment dealing with cheating. So student assessments really can take a variety of forms, and generally, as we learned last semester, it's a good idea to have a number of different ways of assessing students' performance and knowledge as the course proceeds. There are the periodic and summative assessments. Again, these are sort of from last semester. We remember that these can be used for grading, to assign letter grades to students, and to practice retrieval. Also, so if there is small, low grade effort test throughout the year, we can determine how students are assimilating the information that we're trying to provide for them. Long-term projects are things that may last the whole term of the course, and in this case, students can actually contribute to the content of the course. They can go outside of what was in the curriculum and take things in their own direction while they're making meaning of the content of the course in the big picture. Class participation also is another way to assess students' involvement in the class, whether they are engaged, up to date, and to some degree that can be used to direct the discussion to their own interests, which again provides more content to the course, and can give you an idea of what the students are bringing to the course themselves. The choice of the assessments and the quality of that is really will influence the learning process itself, and we're familiar with this variety of different ways of showing a graphical description of Bloom's taxonomy. So basically it comes down to, if you want your students to gain a deep understanding, if you want them to be working at the upper level of this column, then that's what must be evaluated in the class. As Randy Garrison quoted, quote here, that the assessment fundamentally shapes the learning itself. So it's not just a tool to determine how the students are doing, but it's going to shape what they are going to actually learn. And as I was putting this in here, I was thinking of the neuroanatomy classes that I've taught over the many years. Um, these are medical students that have basically about 6 weeks to learn everything about the brain. So it's a very intensive class. And the neuroanatomy starts with simply the learning of all the names of things. So that's the lowest level. They're remembering what this bump looks like and what its name is, and so they can sort of get the language. They can communicate a little bit. The next step is we start to assign functions to each of those structures. Then we connect the structures together to understand the systems and the interactions. We're starting to get to the understanding and applying levels. Then, as they progress and go into clinics, they'll apply this understanding to neurological conditions. They're beginning to analyze normal function and dysfunction, and beyond that, we can devise new theories. We can create and evaluate those theories in the clinic or in the laboratory. So it would, when I looked at this and started thinking about the things that I've done, it really made a lot of sense. Our first test in the neuro classes simply deal with naming structures, and as you move up, they start to apply that to real patients. So what we have in the next slide here may look intimidating. What I want you to do is move these little boxes. We'll just take turns. I'll go down the list. Chris will be first, and then Yolanda, and then Renee. And move them to, if we were to have one of these questions on the test, would it be simply knowledge of facts, sort of at the bottom of that balloon scale, or is it the deep understanding at the upper part? The content of these questions, is something that you may not know, and that's not important. It's sort of what are we asking here? What is the level of the understanding we're asking? So, Chris, would you move that first one? Yeah. What are the four major lobes of the pupil? That's sort of a naming. You sort of do those things. Yolanda, was that you? What are the main potassium? Yeah, very good. When iron channels, that's just naming things again. Renee, move that. Develop a theory. Where's that going to go? Perfect. Develop a theory for the role of glial cells in brain function. Chris, back to you. Extracellular ions affect nerve function. What do you think? Yeah, that's sort of a halfway, and it's a tough one to say. We know a lot about that, but I think there's a certain amount of you have to sort of understand what nerve function does before you can know what the extracellular ions do. So that one may be a little bit gray. Yolanda, what change of tests take place during a seizure? That one's good. You have to understand what happens during a seizure in order to apply it to that. And Renee, you have that last one that starts write a critique. Yeah, good. All right, perfect. I think we've got that. Other than that one sort of gray one which I threw in, and when I wrote that up, I was saying I wonder what we're going to where that one's going to go. Terrific. Excuse me. Let me get my forward page here. We're going to just have a quick chat room discussion to list some of the advantages and disadvantages of online assessments. And one thing I wanted to point out here is that the online assessments can take place in an otherwise face-to-face course, or in a blended course, or a completely online class. So we want to sort of make distinction that we're not really talking necessarily about a totally online class, but just how that assessment is being done. So I would just say throw out one or two words, that would be a positive thing for having an online assessment. But throw that in the chat box. Advantage, easy to administer. Perhaps, yeah, right. You set it up and you just press the go button. Good, Yolanda. Any more positive pros? Easy to grade? Yeah, I had that one too. So that we can, individual student progress can be tracked, and you can see you can also see how good your questions are, because there's so many statistical programs out there to assess how well things are actually testing what you think they are. I also thought that just the convenience, students don't have to take it in class, they don't have to be on the campus. It's something that can be certainly done from a distance. How about the negatives? What's the bad side of that? Slow feedback. Not sure what you mean. When I click on the talk, and Yolanda, tell me what you mean by slow feedback.
Sure. The student takes the assessment online, but then the instructor later has to go in later on to look at it and then take time to get back with the students to discuss it. The students will get usually rapid feedback on the results if it's a test, but they don't have that rapid response from the teacher. So I guess that's disadvantage. I don't know. I'm sorry. That's just my,
okay, no,
I'm not really
fine.
sure what I'm talking about. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I mean, I can, I can see that if somebody takes it at 11 o'clock at night and they don't know why they got this answer wrong, and they would like to have some sort of feedback for that. If it were in an online class, right after they hand the, if we're in a face-to-face, right after they hand the test in, they could say, "What about this question 5? I don't quite get it." So I can see that making sense. Authentic people taking the assessment. Oh, you mean you don't know, Chris? Does that mean you're not sure who's taking it? Actually, the possibility for teaching. You want to click the talk and say if that's where you're getting from, where that's coming from. Yeah, exactly. All right. Yeah, you don't know who's at the other end of the keyboard.
I think you could always have someone that. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it looks like Chris, you're a little bit. I guess we're getting a delay on you, but yeah, I think we got that there. Right. So there's pros and cons, and what's important, I think, in any situation where there's a pros and cons, if you recognize what the cons are, what the problems are, then you can pay more attention to them. You can address them. But let's deal with this thing that Chris brought up, this possibility of cheating. There's, we're living in an information age when there's so much out there. Just at a touch of a button, it almost is like there's a cheat button on your on your computer keypad. It's just a click away, and it may be so tempting for some students to do that. What I did here was to draw on several studies that evaluated self-reporting of teaching by students. So, with the caveat is it's a self-reported study, and I don't know how you would get it actual cheating, but nevertheless, there is that drawback to it. The first thing that came out, this was taken from this article by James Moten Jr. and others, where they kind of did a systematic review, or somewhat the review of the literature of a variety of articles that evaluated student teaching. First was, what was the definition of teaching, and we can come up with a variety of definitions for that that are based on actions, or based on morality. But I was fascinated to see that some students feel that it's not cheating unless they actually get caught. Maybe it's sort of like calories don't count when you're on vacation or something. This may relate to what the objectives are for the course that are laid out by the instructor. So that if the goal is just to get a passing grade, then that's what they're going to strive for. But if it's to obtain some substantial learning, then cheating for the effect of getting a right answer may have less importance. Secondly, the reasons for cheating for the most part, seem to center around the student's desire to get ahead or not fall behind. And what came out in several articles were in the online environment, as we can see amongst us tonight, there's a certain degree of putting things off, procrastinating, wait until the last minute, and time management issues. Sometimes it's just you got a load of stuff to do, and that's the last thing that happens to be on your list. But then when students run out of time at the last minute, the deadline for getting the test completed is coming up, and they don't know the answer. There'd be a stronger drive to seek the answer elsewhere. Call a friend rather than have the time to work on it later. The other question is who's cheating? How many college students are cheating? By self-report, about 30%. And this seems to be those who cheat in the classroom also cheat online, and that kind of suggests that the cheaters do so in either environment. And looking at it the other way, that the online environment really doesn't increase the number of people who are cheaters. Those cheaters are going to cheat, but it does give them perhaps more opportunities to do so. How do they do it? The methods for cheating are as varied as the imagination. There's, again, in this article by Moulton et al., their methods to fraudulently seek additional time. Say, oh, it used to be the dog ate my homework. Now it's the computer had an error, and so I couldn't complete the test. I need extra time. Meanwhile, while they're getting the extra time, they've seen the test, so they're starting to look up all of the answers. Probably as the technology becomes more reliable, this will be less of a problem. Another example that they gave was using two computers at one time, one to do the test and another one to get the answers on Google. Using cell phones to communicate with others is sort of like the in-class method of passing notes or sending signals. The most disturbing are these online sources where you can buy your answers. You send in the test, and they'll give you the answers, right back, and you can put them right into your test. What I'd like to do in thinking about cheating is to run through a case study and have I always like the brainstorming sessions where groups get together and come up with ways of reducing the likelihood of cheating. So we'll do this. This is simply this can happen in a college. This can happen in K through 12, just about any place. An instructor gives a test, and he starts to notice that some students are getting the same scores, they're getting the same wrong answers, and when they answer wrong, it's the same choice. So there's a suspicion of cheating that's going on. This is, of course, on an online environment. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to go to the assessment breakout room, and I'll set a timer. We've been in this for 20 minutes. So I'll set a 3-minute timer, and just have each of you, if as you think about it or discuss it, put up a few notes using the text or using the scrawly pen of ideas of ways that the instructor might be able to mitigate some of this cheating behavior the next time they have a test. So if you would pull yourself into the assessment room, let me know if you have problems, and I'll start the timer. Okay, how did that go? Looks like you're all back here. I'm going to bring up that slide that from your breakout room. Good. So, why don't you everybody come on the talk, and we'll just talk about what you've got here, and maybe go down each list. First, can you see the breakout slide that you had? Is that working?
Yes, it is working.
Ah, good. Yeah, one thing I haven't tried yet. All right. So, what do you what were your ideas?
Well, some of
my
mine
ideas.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Yolanda.
My ideas are a little bit different. I was thinking of maybe having people take the exams or tests together online. I don't know how you would do that, but maybe you know, they would get the tests. I don't know. Let's see, how would they do that? They would maybe have the tests early, and then they would work as a group, say like what we're doing right now, and put their answers together, so they would have a chance to discuss it and come up with a group answer. I also thought about the usual proctored tests where you have a librarian or somebody watching you, or as the article mentioned, or somebody mentioned, that you have somebody watching you via your computer, watching your hand strokes and your eye movement. And then too, you can have, and then students could be assigned random tests on various days. So if you have like a long-term class, you could have groups of students or testing throughout. So not one testing period, but it's continuous, which I think that would be very difficult for the teacher, but that's a way of testing.
Yeah. Chris, what do you think of that last idea? Because that's not one that I had thought of.
No, I like it. It's very unique. I never really thought of that one.
Would it mean you have to have the different content for each student as they take it on different days? Otherwise, some students get more of a chance to study before the test comes out.
I actually was thinking that you would, because as you're going along, it depends on what content you've covered. So some students would get maybe up to day 1, and other students would get up to day 3, other students would get up to day 5. It just depends on where the test is administered, what day it's administered in the course. So it's more, it would be really lots of work, but just an idea.
Yeah, it is. Interesting idea.
By having a test bank like that, you allow yourself to, you can almost differentiate your instruction by, basically on the ability level of the students as well. If you have students that aren't as well educated as others, you could sit there and tier your lesson or your test, your assessment, based on their ability. Yeah. And if you have students that really are overachievers, you could really excel the test to really push their limits to really make them think outside the box as well.
Would that help with avoiding cheating?
I think it would. I think because if you're having kids that struggle, and you have a classroom of kids that may do well, you could basically break up it in two or three different versions of the test. And each student would be able to have a different version of the test, and they couldn't really collaborate together. And then you could have a test bank where you have 3 versions of the low student tests to the high student tests and the middle student tests, and you really never need to recreate the test bank because there's like 9 different versions there.
Yeah. Okay, I understand. Yeah, there are some learning management systems that I'm familiar with that can randomize. You can do it in blocks so that you cover 5 questions from Chapter 1, 5 from Chapter 2, for instance, and so that all the material is covered, but the actual questions are different, and it's in a randomized order too. Just in the interest of time, I think I'm going to move on to some of the suggestions that came out of the article. One of the strongest ones was actually just to have the students sign an honor code. Most schools have an honor code somewhere, back in the back room or in some sort of folder, introduction. But and I know that Wright State has one, and to tell you the truth, I don't think I've ever read it. But if you have them for each class, say this is what your responsibilities are. It turns out that cheating seems to go down under when you've done that. Of course, if you make the learning an objective rather than the grades, then there's less emphasis on cheating and getting the right answer, as long as you know it at the end of the course. And a variety of other things that I've listed here. Limit the time frame for the test completion, so there's less time for communication and Googling. Some management systems can assess the IP address, so you can see whether suddenly 3 or 4 students are coming from exactly the same computer, sequentially. Randomized questions from the things that Chris and Yolanda brought up, and I think Renee had a proctoring service or some sort of system to monitor students. I know Wright State, many of my faculty use a plagiarizing detection services that can pick out articles that have or papers that have been written before, taken from the web. Most fascinating one I thought was to have an instructor mole, where the instructor signs up as a student and just sort of searches around on the chat box or whatever to see if there's any cheating going on. I think that's a little beyond the edge of the envelope that I'd want to do, but it was an interesting thing that was one of the things that seemed to have come up. I had one example of plagiarism, even from medical doctors over the years. We do a journal club, and they're expected to review an article and summarize it. And one physician turned in a summary that was written on the web by somebody else. And reason I picked it up was because he wasn't a very good English writer, and suddenly he was giving beautiful flowing text, and it just didn't seem right. So I Googled a couple of the sentences, and bam, the whole thing came up, which is really too bad. I really didn't like to see that. Anyway, that's about the end of what we're going to cover today. Just to summarize, we evaluated assessments, and there's good evidence that assessments, when designed to be congruent with the course objectives, move the student learning further into deeper understanding. Online assessments have the good side and bad sides for both the instructors and the students, and if we can focus on mitigating the challenges, we will be further along. Cheating may be able to be easier done in the online situation, but there are methods to reduce the likelihood of cheating or the ability of students to do any cheating using test design and other electronic technologies. So with that, we'll end it. That's all, folks. Till next time, have a good weekend. Thank you, Yolanda. Thanks, Renee. I'll wait for everybody to sign off before I close it up. Thank you, Chris.